This episode of The Biggest Table is brought to you in part by Wild Goose Coffee. Since 2008, Wild Goose has sought to build better communities through coffee. For our listeners, Wild Goose is offering a special promotion of 20% off a one-time order using the code TABLE at checkout. To learn more and to order coffee, please visit wildgoosecoffee.com. I hope you enjoy this episode. Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Biggest Table. I am your host, Andrew Camp, and in this podcast, we explore the table, food, eating, and hospitality as an arena for experiencing God's love and our love for one another. And today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Michael Twitty. Michael is an acclaimed culinary historian and author of the two-time James Beard Award-winning book, The Cooking Gene, as well as Rice and Koshersoul. He has written for many publications and been featured throughout print and broadcast media, including The Guardian, The New York Times, The Washington Post, PBS, and NPR's The Splendid Table. He has given over 500 public talks and appeared in numerous series, including Taste the Nation and High on the Hog. So thanks for joining me today. Again, Michael, it's great to have you as a guest again.
No problem.
Yeah, you're my first returning guest on my podcast. So.
Oh, wow. Very cool.
Yeah. So I recorded an earlier episode. It was episode 17 with Michael. It was released back on June 18th, 2024. And so encourage you to check that one out. But a lot of that conversation just sort of centered on your journey, especially your books, The Cooking Gene and Koshersoul. And so for our listeners who haven't listened or aren't familiar, beyond your bio, who is Michael Twitty? And what's your journey been like?
So, when I was very young, I told my parents that they asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I said I wanted to be a writer and a chef, a preacher and a teacher. And I think that answer probably came off of the Bible verse, yeah. The one with the fishes of men and the.
Yeah.
But I think in some ways it's come true. I mean, I do things that are not normal. I'm a former Hebrew school teacher, 15 years in different synagogues. I am a culinary historian, which means I focus on the food history of not just food, but people's relationship to food. Yeah. What they turn food into and what that food in turn turns them into.
Oh, I love that.
And I'm a food writer. I'm not a restaurant chef. A lot of times I get people will go, so you're a chef, so you're in a restaurant, so you're a food critic. And I'm like, no, there's more than just those things in the food world. And by the way, if it's a food critic, I wouldn't tell you.
Right.
Most food critics are anonymous. And a restaurateur, why would I have time to talk to somebody if I'm running a restaurant? People, it's not like Sesame Street. These are the people in your neighborhood, and you just meet everybody and smile and have a conversation and move on. And I say that with as little grit as I can possibly muster, just because people need to understand that the food world is very vast, very complicated, and to put it as bluntly as possible, people like me, people of African descent, people of color, we may make our presence known, but there's not that many of us. So people think, oh, sure, there's got to be, not in proportion to who we are in the population or in the Western world in general.
Wow.
We're just not we're not the majority. And that's important because when we publish books and publish work or propose projects, particularly those that come from our cultural lens or our history or whatever, you have to convince people to get behind that and publish it unless you do it yourself.
Yeah.
And like a lot of people, I started off doing my own work, and then I got, what do I say? I got tagged, I went viral, and the bottom line is because of that, I was able to have a career of my own and be able to speak for myself in ways I probably didn't imagine. But part of that was because we simply don't have the opportunity to have our own voices and our own venues. And so we speak on our own terms in our own space. And amazingly, that tends to be quite popular.
Right.
And then you have an editor, and people just think you just whip a book up. They think that you just, they don't understand, like, then they go, when's your next book? And it's the craziest question. No writer would ever ask another writer, when's your next book? Because
No.
this isn't quick. It isn't fast. It's a whole process. And there was literally a birthing and a grieving at the two ends of that process. Once it's out in the world, you see all the mistakes. It's like having children.
Yeah.
First they're perfect and they're beautiful, and you're like, wow, that's me, and that's my spouse, or that's someone who I've been entrusted with raising them and giving them a life.
Mm-hmm.
And then one day you get called into the school because they put used gum into some of the kids' mouth, and you're like, damn, that's my kid.
Yep.
But you realize as they grow, they reflect you, and it's like your work in the world.
Yeah.
Yes, there's mistakes. Yes, there's typos. Yes, there's things you wish you put in. But at the end of the day, that is still part of you. That's out in the world, and it will have its own legacy, just like you've had yours.
And so, as a culinary historian, anybody in the food world or loves the history of food or thinking about this table, like, you're a name that comes up a lot, right? Like, and your work has influenced a lot of us. But you wrote a cookbook, and so why a cook as a culinary historian? What led you to want to write a cookbook versus sort of a history of Southern food?
So I've kind of, in some ways, the cooking gene and kosher soul, which get mistaken as cookbook for some people, and they're like, "Well, I'm not a cook, so I don't need a cookbook." I'm like, something. Let me backtrack just for a second. I think, in light of what I just said about people's background, identity, and their contributions to the food world, I think it's really important people understand this. A lot of the cookbooks that are done by Black authors have little tidbits of their lives, but no real full exploration, because that wasn't what was ever asked of them. I think one of the many groundbreaking pieces that were done was strawberry and spoon bread. Strawberry wine and spoon bread and strawberry wine. And two sisters from North Carolina, from New York, and the Darden sisters, and then Crystal Wilkinson, who is here present with us, her first big food book. Whose name I can't think of at the moment. But because I'm tired. But the bottom line is, Crystal Wilkinson did a beautiful book, and it really shows her family's life and history in Kentucky, and the food that she grew up with, as an Appalachian family. But for the most part, it's like little tidbits tucked away, but no real Black food books in the sense of an integrated life with food. Food is, it's almost like, and Ntozake Shange did a beautiful book many, many years ago, which got updated. She's no longer with us. The poet and playwright. If I can cook, God can. Crystal Wilkinson, in Praise to the Kitchen Ghost. Sorry, Crystal. We got it in there.
Yeah.
But I mean, the bottom line is that there's almost none by Black men. No, almost none. I can think of some beautiful things that Richard Wright once said, and a little here. That, of course, has cookbooks by Black male chefs.
Yeah.
Like I said, you can glean parts of the story, but it's not really, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
A full integrated text where food, family history, personal history, or whatever, life experience. There's not a whole lot of books that would, like, say, for example, have the same tone as a Ruth Reichel book. You know what I'm saying, about food and life. And so that's what I really want to do, because I want to show we have lives. And there are people who looked at the cooking gene and went, why did you put that personal detail, or why'd you put that story in? I'm here for the food. And because you are a religious man, I'm going to refrain from saying various cuss words. So I'm going to say gobbledygook, raccoon vomit. instead, and therefore just put people on notice that this is my life. I don't owe you. If you don't want it, you don't have to be here. But I do owe it to myself to tell my food story.
Yeah.
And a kitchen story. And kitchens are social places. And for a lot of cultures, but especially Black American culture. And because of that, I often have a few recipes sprinkled in, a lot of personal memoir and food history and family history.
Mm-hmm.
I did that for both Cooking Gene and Kosher Soul. I was asked to find people for a Southern cookbook, a big Bible Southern cookbook. They call them Bibles, not me. And just in case you were wondering.
Yeah.
But this book was supposed to be for somebody else. And it ended up being me just because I was just like, can't find, and I really couldn't because, hey guys, cookbooks are not that remunerative. Some are, but if you're like the most well-paid whatever, a lot of it goes into that production value and research and assistance, and it's a lot. But I am going to say that this was something that I felt a certain responsibility to take on.
Yeah.
Because going back to what I said again, Black people just haven't had the same space to talk about the South in the same ways. A lot of times, Southernness, so probably anticipate a question you have, is incorporated or interpreted through the lens of whiteness.
Yeah.
What does he mean by that? Why does he have to talk about race and identity and color? Because if you ask most people what their definition of the South, the first thing that pops in their head is the Confederacy.
Yeah.
How long was the land in the South settled by human beings? Probably about 11,000 years. But you take 4 years of that whole experience defined by white supremacy, enslavement, abuse and exploitation of human beings that it was actually long before and long after, and define a region by a weird border that does not in fact include Maryland, Kentucky, Missouri, or West Virginia.
Yeah.
Now, I know we have some people listening who are going to go, well, first of all, Maryland was the North. Sorry. Maryland was the North. This Maryland was not the North. That's a whole other podcast. West Virginia may have split from Virginia, but here's the deal. They split from Virginia, but do you really think the people on the other side of that board had any different culture?
No.
Not the ones living in the Blue Ridge and the Appalachian part of Virginia. Nope. Kentucky was kind of like half-ish. Missouri was half-ish. So people go, Missouri wasn't. I said a lot of it was.
Yeah.
I just those kind of arguments get really in the way. But again, Black people in particular, ever since we came up with soul, it was really, really that way. We've never really been allowed to be Southerners. Not in the same terms white people have been. Like that's a thing. And then when we introduced soul into the mix, we were soul and they were Southern. So I have a cookbook in front of me that is white Appalachian and Afro-Appalachian, that is, Creole and Cajun, that is Mississippi Chinese, Kurdish from Tennessee, that is Latino from all over, recent and past, that is all the different groups. Not just salt and pepper, Southernness. And, wanting to talk about diversity, migration, immigration, and all the different pieces that make up being Southern people. And as a culinary historian, I was given, wide berth to really inject that part of my passion into this cookbook. So every recipe has context, has history, has a story, because it's part of our family.
No, it is. And that's what I love. Even, just the introduction alone to your cookbook, which, for listeners is Recipes from the American South, is just worth the price, just because it does at least open the gates to say, okay, Southern food is way more than what we typically define it as. And you even just go into the fact that Southern food is, you have this great quote that Southern food is a product of fortunate collisions, cooperation, and sometimes chaos or confusion. There's a lot that went into Southern food. And so can you even describe, like, if you had to encapsulate what Southern food is, can you encapsulate it into a brief sentence, or is it just too broad that it belies definition?
I think that it's broad, but I also think that if you could just kind of like focus on certain things. For example, the cookbook cover back and forth is really a thesis in of itself. There's black-eyed peas, corn, and collard greens. The representation on the back, there's okra. So we have indigenous America. We have, for lack of a better term, Eurasia and the old world.
Mm-hmm.
And we also have Africa. And the synthesis of all those different pieces is really what makes Southernness unique. I mean, yes, there were Black people, white people, and indigenous people in New England, but it wasn't the same recipe.
Mm-hmm.
There were lots of different kinds of people in the middle colonies, not the same recipe. From Maryland South, there was a whole different dynamic that morphed into a different dynamic. And while time moved on in other regions, people moved across the Southern landscape. They took the Chesapeake Bay into the bluegrass, and then took that into the Southern Midlands, and then took that into the Southern Plains. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Well, they took the Low Country into the Deep South, took it all the way to the Southern Midlands, and took that to the Southern coastline. People just kept, and of course, there are people. The same story could be said for people who landed in Biloxi or Mobile or Galveston and New Orleans, pushing out from the coast upward.
Mm-hmm.
And the constant dialogue between the South and the Caribbean.
Right.
All those things made the South unique. It's corn and rice and wheat. Those are the staple grains. And then if we talked about vegetables that are unique and important, the okra, the collard greens, the black-eyed peas, elements of an enslaved person's garden. The corn, the beans, and the squash, the makshu, the succotash. You could, if I really wanted to push this book over the top, and I had the time and the money and the effort, I would create a family tree. So people could go, oh, I get it now.
Yeah.
And of course, it's pork, chicken, fish, seafood, and game. Those are the majority of the proteins
we're
talking about. And so all those different elements kind of push together. And what's really powerful is that you might have succotash on the southeastern seaboard, but makshu in Louisiana, and okra, corn, and tomatoes in the middle. And, burgoo or Brunswick stew. I mean, all these things, jambalaya and etouffee, but also smothered this and red rice. And a lot of the dishes, regardless of the culture, have parallels or cousin dishes, right?
Right.
And most of the time, it's not because they're not derivative. It's because they come from the same kinds of mixtures of peoples, with the same kind of ecosystems, climate, etc. And of course, the other part that it's so problematic, powerful, and unavoidable is the fact that the American obsession with power dynamics based on race, exploitation, and extraction.
Yeah.
The kids are saying extraction these days, and I'm actually kind of glad of it. And hierarchies are involved, because we often think, as I wrote in the introduction, we often think about the South through 2 or 3 different lenses of, one is the patrician plantation table, and another one is the poor folks table.
Yep.
And I don't really know of another region of North America, let alone the United States, where there are these very sharp and very powerful stereotypes and tropes.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never heard of someone say, Minnesota, land of the patrician, whatever, and the poor guy, No, I never heard that.
Hmm.
So, and I mean, the number of books and novels and poetry and movies and short films and artistic creations that depict the South, either on the terms of Southerners or on the terms of those onlooking with fascination at Southernness,
Right.
have also added to this. You can't, the pop culture part is unavoidable.
Yeah.
And so is the
No.
high culture too.
Yeah. Because you write that the politics of Southern food are omnipresent. That like this is the reality we have to confront when we talk about the Southern table, the Southern recipes, the Southern gardens. Like this is the reality we're facing, and it's all intertwined. You know, and what I love about you is, your storytelling tells the story of the beauty and the hardship of what this food is, and the origins and the stories that go with it. Um, so yeah, like that's, and so I think too, you invite us to be curious. What is Southern food, and how do we get past the, our preconceptions and ideas of Southern food as fried chicken, biscuits and gravy, or we all have ideas, even if I've never been to the South much, like maybe once or twice, but I have ideas and deep beliefs about what Southern food is. And yet, like, again, your book is this love letter to Southern food and the Southern table. And so it's like, how do we be curious as we think about all this intertwining of cultures that has happened to give us the Southern table?
Where have you been in the South?
I don't even, that's where I'm like, maybe.
That's fine.
Yeah, no, like, Texas, if you consider Texas, part of the South.
Depends on what part of Texas.
Yeah, right. Like I've been out of cruises in Galveston, or like been to San Antonio briefly, which
Galveston would count. San Antonio is in suspect.
Yeah,
but
never.
Again, that's part of the deal.
Yeah, right. Yeah, never been to Louisiana, never been to Alabama or Mississippi. And yet I have deep ideas of what Southern food should be or is.
And of course, it's there's this really interesting line. I forget who it's attributable to. I don't know if it wasn't M.K. Fisher. Who was this? I think it was. I can see her books and face in my head. And there's this she's well known. I'm having one of those days. And extremely important food writer. I have my phone turned off. I can't look it up.
Yeah.
But she talked about how she was like, they went to Williamsburg in search of like this wonderful old school Southern food. And apart from a few places within colonial Williamsburg, which at that time, it really was like a kind of like a local, not local, that's not a great way to say it, the Virginia cuisine haven.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is different times. I mean, this is when you could get like, those are the days when you can get like a full, like whole ass lobster on the plane kind of deal. And, there's extravagant, the taverns, like, King's Arms, which is always well known, and the restaurant system that's separate from the actual historical part.
Mm-hmm.
And they said outside of that, there was like they wanted these little like country dives and other places and diners and little cabins, and they couldn't find them, or it was like automobile tourist food. It's still a big part of the food culture of Williamsburg, the town, are the pancake houses.
Okay.
It's where mostly Greek owned and run. But again, that's part of the Southern history. Until the arrival of Italians, Greeks, and Jews, and predominantly Greeks, there weren't a whole lot of actual restaurants. A lot of times, hotels, taverns, inns doubled, but sometimes they weren't great. Or you went somebody's house. That's why the whole hospitality thing was such a big deal. Like people who have the money and the time and the ability, and also remember that the South had poor infrastructure, especially prior to the Civil War. So having somebody at your spot and inviting your neighbors and friends to meet so-and-so and putting, having your workforce, predominantly Black and then immigrant, make a meal was a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
So those pancake houses owned by Greek folks, that's how it went, right?
Yeah.
But also the idea that people would go to this, people think they're always going to go to the South and see these diners, truck stops and dives kind of deal version.
Yeah.
Or, these elegant, hyper contemporary Southern restaurants that elevate Southern food as if it had to be elevated. All that's really important to the narrative, and even that conflict. It's not going to be, like you said, it's not going to be cut and dry. It's not going to be clean and easy. It's going to be what it is.
Right. And so you've already hit on it a little bit, but as you thought about this book, like what common misconceptions about Southern food and even the South in general are you hoping your book maybe corrects or just sheds light on in different ways that need, people to see in new ways?
It's all salt and pepper people. No. It's Chinese, Japanese, Vietnamese folks, especially now Vietnamese folks.
Right.
Mississippi, Louisiana in particular, Texas, coastal Texas in particular, Houston.
Yeah.
Alabama, other places, who talk with a country twang. It's Latino kids who are second, third generation, even within my lifetime and yours, whose favorite thing is Zaxby's and Bojangles. And Spanish is not great. The same English that other Southern people speak.
Right.
It's, masjids in the South. It's synagogues that have had a very long history that I described in Koshersoul, the foodways. Yeah.
Yep.
It's the fact that even the salt and pepper people have, a rich diversity of cultures and languages and food histories. Everything in the South is not fried.
No.
Or boiled to death.
Right.
Everything in the South is not spicy. Everything all the food in the South is not necessarily on some continuum between poor and rich.
Yeah.
And what is very powerful is that, unlike other places, you see that African influence is not just big in terms of the ingredients and the cooking, but in terms of the hospitality and the style and the mood, a vibe. So, in Africa, and somebody's going to inevitably will say, well, Africa's a big place. I know that, baby. I've been in 8 different African countries. Try me.
Yeah.
Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, Black Africa, I hate those terms, but I have to use them for people's mindset, their vision. It's a common thing that the ruler, the royalty, the nobility crave the same kind of like foods that are staple to the culture. It's because there's no, apart from foreign ingredients and certain kinds of animal protein, there really isn't a hierarchy in terms of food. It's replete within African folklore and songs and poetry and music, and also just the king wants the same fufu as the peasant.
Right.
I've been to many Southern Foodways Alliance gatherings where the biscuit or the cornbread was, by an esteemed cook or chef was. I'm like, wait a minute. If somebody else would come from outside of our culture and be like, well, okay, that's just biscuit and cornbread. Like, yes, well made is the thing.
Yeah.
That's a carryover, whether people realize it or not, from that African heritage. And why wouldn't it be? Because we're the ones who cooked a lot of the food. Not all of it. I'm very keen on that. I don't want to overstate it, because there were vast areas where there were none of us.
Right.
But what's so powerful is that it didn't matter that there were no longer Powhatans in mass numbers or Nanticokes. The food and the words and some of the traditions came down to people who never met a Native American. And some of those African foodways came down to people who didn't have a Black population around them. And I think that's an important thing people need to understand, is that, there's that, but also Southern food should be known for its ability to be passed down through the generations.
Yeah.
Southern food, as I say in the cookbook, and I write in the cookbook often, I talk about the life cycle, I talk about herbalism and healing traditions, I talk about all these things with essays. And of course, sprinkled throughout the book are references to music and to dance. I mean, there's a chitlin dance. I've never done it. I don't know what it looks like, and I would never do it. But there's a chitlin dance, the Chitlin Festival in South Carolina. It's called the Chitlin Strut. And we all know of country, hip hop, blues, which it goes without saying, blues, jazz, country, a lot of R&B, born in the South.
Mm-hmm.
And so therefore the music makes reference to food, and food is a part of life, and food as expression of sensuality, and food is an expression of nostalgia and memory. And so it gets incorporated with these music forms that began in the South.
Huh.
And of course, like and I say people, there's no sweet tea line. There's no grits line. That's so dumb, because there millions of Southerners have moved out, and some of those descendants have moved back.
Mm-hmm.
So there's sweet tea all over the country now.
Right.
Somebody might say, "Well, no, that's not where I am from." Come on now. You know this place called McDonald's?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Even that shows you. I mean, that's within our lifetimes, but it just shows you that there have been enough Southern people who have made that migratory push and have influenced other people. People know we can cook.
Right.
They know our food is the best food.
Mm-hmm. And
so therefore, why else? I mean, you don't. Okay, let me give you this just joke I used to say on my own presentations. Please show me a clam bake restaurant in Chicago. You get me? Mm-hmm. Please show me, like, I don't know, a Pacific Northwest Dungeness crab feast in Iowa. Right?
Yeah.
But you can buy fried chicken almost anywhere.
Right. Mm-hmm.
You can buy, sweet tea, and you can get biscuits and gravy. And a lot of these are things that are obviously Southern. You can get dirty rice and red. I mean, this is just like, please, we've already made our, whether people consider fast food a sign of impact, I definitely do.
Mm-hmm.
And it shows you that our region has made an impact, not always for the better, not always the greatest. But then again, that's why people like me would go, man, I can't eat that unless I'm really hard up, because I have to make it at my house. I know what I want it to taste like and look like.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not one of the people that goes, people ask me all the time, so where do I get great fried chicken? My house.
Right. Yeah.
I get great barbecue? My house.
Mm-hmm.
Point being is that no place, honestly, can satisfy those cravings for what I grew up with and how my mother and grandmother and father and uncles cooked.
Yeah.
Like where I'm from. And also I would eat, of course, I'm going to eat at somebody's house who is also Southern. I'll tell you a quick example. I met a lady in New Orleans, and she was driving the shuttle. It was just me and her. And I said, New Orleans people talk a good game about food and, what restaurant, but y'all don't even like the restaurants. You say it's always grandma's house, always your house. So she said, you'll be at my house on Friday at 3:00. And I said, all right. And I showed up a little bit early, and she was making gumbo zeb, which is gumbo with vegetables, greens.
Yeah.
She made gumbo with chicken, and she made gumbo with crab and shrimp. And she did it from scratch and was showing me how to do it. And I was just like, okay, this is wild. She made her own French bread of the loaves. I mean, the dough, the starter, the loaves, everything. Wow. The salad, the Creole tomatoes. Oh my God. And then it was like neighbors came over, and it was a community event, a family event. And I'm sure there's a lot of people who are Southern like, yeah, that's how we do it. We do life cycle events. We do hog killing time. We do seafood boils. We do, what do you call it? When you tailgating.
Yeah.
We do all those things. We do it as a community and create family. And that's exactly what I mean. It's just like, that's part of us too.
No, it is. And that nostalgia, those memories, people will go to arms to defend, their grandma's recipe versus your grandma's recipe. And, And that's the joy of food, of saying, hey, let me show you how it's done. Come to my house, where, yeah, you know, uh, it's beautiful. It's fun. And like you said, Southern food is ubiquitous around the nation. Like I grew up in Southern California, but like I grew up having Hoppin' Johns every New Year's Day for good luck. And my
Hmm.
dad would order sorghum syrup, um, you know, by the gallons because, he has some Southern roots. And so like it got passed down, and so to this day I have a little sorghum in my house, and it's delicious. I love sorghum. Um, and so yeah, like it is an interesting thing of how ubiquitous Southern food is throughout, you know, all cities, all states.
Yeah,
Uh,
because we've gone everywhere, we've moved everywhere, and also we tend to maintain ties
yeah.
with the homeland. I mean, a lot of Southern people said, "Okay, I got to go to this place for opportunity," and then within a generation or two, some of the kids or people move back, and and of course the home. We use terms like home and home place.
Mhm.
There is no such thing as we leave and we never go back in any kind of way. We always maintain a connection, and
Yeah.
that sorghum part is very, very, very deep. I just want you to know that
Huh.
because my grandfather used to give me syrup from the country when I would head back home,
Hmm.
and then a lady, white lady from Texas who has heritage in Tennessee. She was actually living in Seattle. And she says to me, older lady, she says to me, I remember you saying this cooking gene. Well, I wanted you to have this. And so she, like I said, Texas, Tennessee, lives in Seattle. She brought me a little thing of sorghum.
Oh wow.
And it's one of those things where it's a taste of home, but it's also a taste of our history, but it's also like a connection thing. And I was very moved by that.
Hmm.
When you said your father have the sorghum and you have the sorghum, that's it's one of those things that yes does make a thread, a root, a connection between us and them and all the generations.
My wife to this day was like, I don't even understand what sorghum is, and she's like, it's not molasses and it's not maple syrup and it's not sweet, but it is sweet. And it's like, to her, it's just this foreign concept, where to me, like, slather that on some cornbread,
Or
pancakes, waffles,
biscuit.
French toast,
Mm-hmm.
biscuit. Yeah, like it's good on everything.
Yep.
Um, so yeah, it's an interesting. I never thought of it as a connection to the South of like, yeah, like there is deep threads of sorghum um, throughout Southern people. Um, so as you wrote this book, what surprised you putting together a cookbook? Like, what did anything catch you off guard? You know, surprise you in a good way, bad way? Like what?
No, but after I was done, I started noticing the parallels. Like I mentioned earlier, makshu succotash,
Hmm.
crab chop, crab cake,
Hmm.
and so on and so on. All these foods have these like parallel traditions within one region. It's a big ass region. I mean,
Yeah.
it's the largest cultural and population region in the country.
Right.
And so, I mean, Georgia is the largest state east of the Mississippi. Texas is number 2 in terms of population. Um, Atlanta, Charlotte, mid-level cities like Richmond, Mobile, cities with huge cultural impact, no matter what. New Orleans, Charleston, Louisville, and I'm gonna hurt some people's feelings, and I really don't care. Um, old school cities like Baltimore, Annapolis. Um, and if anyone says that's not the South, where did Kentucky get sold?
Hmm.
Annapolis. Where was Frederick Douglass from? The Eastern Shore in Baltimore. Where did Harriet Tubman come from? The state of Maryland.
Hmm. Yeah.
Get out of my face with that. Just because you don't see Confederate flags flying everywhere, which once upon a time, actually, during the Civil War, to be honest with you, a lot of Marylanders were pro-Confederate and made that
Hmm.
known
Hmm.
very publicly. And part of the reason why I'm even here talking to you on this podcast is because for all his benefits and faults, Abraham Lincoln had the good sense to basically shut the Maryland legislature down so they couldn't secede because they
Wow.
were going to.
Hmm.
If he hadn't done that, I wouldn't be free.
Right. Wow.
So there's that. But also the other parts of the South that tend to get marginalized, Missouri, parts of Missouri, not all of Missouri,
No.
but Oklahoma, West Virginia. I'm sorry I didn't put a pepperoni roll recipe in the cookbook.
Okay.
Very West Virginia. And it
Okay.
comes from the Italian immigrants who went to the coal mines.
Yeah.
Right? Oklahoma, I did get in there with the chicken fried steak because the whole, Oklahoma state meal, rice, okra, chicken fried steak,
Okay.
and cornbread, right?
Yeah.
I mean, all the different parts of the story that are in there. And yeah, I mean, I was kind of surprised that first of all that I was able to edit my brain.
Right.
I'm obsessed with this since I was 6, 7 years old.
Hmm.
You know, so for me, this isn't like for other people. It's just like this is my version of sports.
Yeah.
This is my version of pop culture,
Mm-hmm.
Southern food and its history and its culture. So like, yeah, and one of the cool things that I think I remember I did was when I started writing about barbecue sauce, which is really fun.
Yeah.
And rubs and things. The North Carolina barbecue sauce, I suggested a variation where you throw in a little bit of ginger ale.
Hmm.
People be like, most North Carolina barbecue sauce is actually just watered down hot sauce. I'm not lying.
Okay.
In the East, not in the West, in the East. But this one mop recipe, which I remember, I mean, I saved the article. I don't know where the article is now. It might be here. It might be thrown away. Was from Southern Living. And they talked about the difference in barbecue, which I wasn't really privy to, but I was a little boy. I was like 7, 8 years old. No joke. And so this article, because my grandmother used to get Southern Living, of course, like most Southern grandmas did. And I was like, whoa, ginger ale and a sauce. Wow. And so I remembered that and I put that in a variation for the recipe because that's one of my earliest memories of. Now, some shockers for the audience. Pimento cheese, hummingbird cake, key lime pie, not originating in the South in their form. So
Okay.
nope. And I had a guy from North Carolina argue with me. He's like, "Well, no, the Civil War pimento cheese, nope, nope. It wasn't there." Because I argued my family didn't have it, didn't enjoy it, because a lot of my family was part of the Great Migration generation. Not all, but many.
Mm-hmm.
And cheese also wasn't like a big thing for us. I mean, a few things, but not really. I mean, this kind of like American equals processed cheese thing was not our story.
No.
And also we had left, a lot of us had left before that became very popular. It's industrial food, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, those are some of the aha moments, but not too deep.
Yeah.
But for me, the biggest challenge was editing my brain and kind of getting everything I could in there. Although I messed up because I didn't include fried okra.
Okay.
But I never made fried okra.
Yeah.
And most people don't make it. They buy it frozen and they fry it. It's like saying French fries. Okay, great.
Yeah. Right. So if there is, are there recipes you're most proud of, or if people were like, because this is a thick book, lots of recipes, beautiful recipes, but like, is there one recipe or two recipes you're most proud of that you're like, hey, if you're going to cook one recipe, which recipe should I cook?
I don't know how to answer that. I would say that I'm really proud of, for example, the grape dumplings. I'm proud of the recipes or the pig's ears. Pig's ears, we're not talking about the actual pig's ear. We're talking about oreille de cochon, which is like it's a Cajun sweet made with a fried pastry, a cane syrup, and pecans.
Mm-hmm.
I'm proud of recipes that it kind of, I've bumped up back into the list of things people to try and make.
Okay.
Recipes can go extinct too.
Yeah, for sure.
That's what I'm most proud of.
Yeah. No, that's cool. Yeah, I saw that grape dumplings recipe and never heard of grape dumplings. Can you give us a brief hit? Like what's the history?
Native American. And
Okay.
Sean Sherman in his beautiful new cookbook, Turtle Island, also has a recipe. However, our difference is that Southerners and Native Americans in the South would eventually make them cornmeal and white flour. He uses cassava flour and cornmeal.
Okay.
Although his is a contemporary version, -2. And just goes to show you, this was a big part of, indigenous life, particularly in the fall,
Hmm.
when the fox grapes and muscadine scuppernongs were wild, would be harvestable and very sweet.
Yeah.
And they would take the little balls of cornmeal, throw them in there, and they'd absorb
Hmm.
the juice. And these are things that are really old school, that have an antiquity to them. I mean, a version of this recipe was probably made long before a single European even thought about America.
I appreciate that. And I'm curious, you I follow you on Instagram and you're not shy, about posting about the moment we're living in. And so like as you think about culinary history, the table, hospitality, like what do you hope in this moment, maybe food, whether it's Southern, whatever food we veered, what could the table provide for humanity?
A lesson on empathy, sharing, compassion, how not to be selfish, how to appreciate gifts of the Creator, to know that we have to nourish the earth. I think a lot of people mistake. People, I have to say this: people sometimes have an attitude towards earth reverence that smacks of, they know that in their bones and in their body is this reverence for nature and the earth. But I think some believers mistake that reverence for blasphemy.
Mm-hmm.
But you cannot possibly read into the depths of ethics in the Hebrew Bible or in the Christian Bible without understanding the agrarian,
Yeah.
natural.
Mm-hmm.
In front, I just happen to have this. This is from the Farminary at Princeton, which
All
is
right.
led by, a person who grew up Mennonite,
Yep.
and it says, "Let creation preach."
Mm-hmm.
And one thing Eric said to me was talked about like the compost pile giving a sermon
Mm.
about resurrection and life and what need to comes out of our life as opposed to what we put into it.
Yeah.
And I think the table does a very similar work, but maybe not as profound. In Jewish tradition, we call the table the mizbeach, the altar, because
Mm.
the house is the mikdash mount. It's a little temple.
Yeah.
There's the synagogue where there's the house. Your house functions in similar ways. And in most traditions, the table is a place of nourishment, gathering. We take these things for granted. Because we have a Thanksgiving doesn't mean we really understand all the values around that.
No.
For me personally, I ask people to think about the person who isn't at the table this year,
Mm.
who has been kidnapped, who has been deported, who has been assaulted, who has been harmed. I ask them to think about the labor of the food, labor that led to the food that's on the table, rather. I ask them to think about the resources that were extracted and exploited to get that food to the table. I ask them to think about the lives of the animals and the perpetuation of the plants and the species that feed us.
Mm.
Think about everything. It's not enough to make a confession of faith. If you really have live a life of faith, then there is absolutely nothing that your spirituality or religious tradition doesn't touch on.
Yeah.
Okay? And the food and the table is a gateway to understanding that. And I ask people to do that because I think there's a tendency now, especially, that cultural issues are exploited for shock value and for anger and emotions. But that dopamine religion, that
Mm-hmm.
dopamine spirituality is just not the equal of having a consistent sense of amazement, virtue, sacrifice, and joy in living life for God on the terms of a blessed humanity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah.
Don't think anything more needs to be said.
Hopefully the next generations that are here with us now and will continue on will have more to say,
Yeah.
because this is for them. It's always for them. I think that one thing I want to kind of like put on the table, as it were, is something that I was taught a long time ago, and it still remains to be true. Everything that happens to us occurs for the sake of someone else, and everything that happens to others occurs for our sake.
Mm. Yeah.
We are meant to be interdependent, and we are meant to feed each other.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. My flourishing should result in the flourishing of everybody else, and other people's flourishing should result in my flourishing.
That's right.
Yep. And if my flourishing leads to the violence of others, whether it be living, non-living, then we need to rethink what that actually looks like.
That's right.
I love it. I love your wisdom, Michael. It's always such a gift to talk with you. Yeah, your heart, your passion, your non-BS way of, in a good way, right? Like,
yes, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, we need truth tellers, and you're a truth teller, and you're a storyteller.
Thank you.
And so obviously people pick up recipes from the American South, but are there other places? Where can people find you if they want to follow you, learn more about your work?
Instagram is great. The Cooking Gene. I'm also the Cooking Gene on Threads, and Koshersoul on Blue Sky.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
So follow Michael. Again, thank you, Michael, for the time.
No problem.
And if you've enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing, leaving a review, or sharing it with others. Thanks for joining us on this episode of The Biggest Table, where we explore what it means to be transformed by God's love around the table and through food. Until next time, bye.